Okay, so we're coming into the conclusion of volume 16, the first book in Hilchot Shabbat and the Tzurba Rabbanan English edition series, the Lax Family Edition, the Weiss Family Volume. Our shiurim here are sponsored by Adam Abraham Mizrahi and his family, and they should see many good things and all the brachot. This also tonight's shiur is being learned L'Fuat Shlema Ariel ben Rachel Raya should see a complete recovery very, very soon. Bekarov, as well as Mishael ben Brucha should also be seeing a complete recovery very soon. Again, Moshe ben Pinchas, complete recovery. And everyone needs a Yeshua should see a Yeshua. Okay, today we're on page 327 and the Tzurba Rabbanon, and we're going to be, as it says here, Hilchos Kiddush Aleph. So there's going to be 3 shiurim on Kiddush. Kiddush is one of the main highlights of Shabbos, right? You have Kiddush Friday night, you have Kiddush Shabbos morning, you have Havdalah. The Rambam learns Havdalah is like Kiddush, right? So Havdalah and Kiddush are the 2 sides of the same coin. Not everyone may agree to that, but at least the Rambam says that. So we have 3 shiurim that we're going to get into. Today's shiur is really going to be on the chiyuv of Kiddush, the obligation of Kiddush, primarily speaking, the Friday night Kiddush. What is the obligation? Who is obligated to recite Kiddush? And those are the main halachot that we're going to be dealing with tonight. If we have some time, we'll get into the machshava and the Sefer HaChinuch at the end. So let's start off. Before we start off at Tzurba Rabbanan in source 1, I want to read from the Yalkut Yosef English edition, page 217. Just a little bit on Kiddush. Just, I think it's very important for a lot of young men, especially, but even older men. The halacha starts off over here. Person should go quickly home to make Kiddush after Tfilat Arvit. Because he's supposed to do it as early as possible. And anyone goes quickly home to make Kiddush, he's very praiseworthy. And therefore, don't schmooze around after davening. Don't sit around and schmooze. Okay? Run home to make Kiddush. Okay, we'll get into that blessing of after Kiddush, before Kiddush later, but I wanted to just read those lines. The lines is that after Tfilat Arvit, on straight home in Kiddush. Straight home in Kiddush. No tally-wally, no tra-la-la-da-la-la. Straight home, nowhere. Doesn't say he should stop and learn. He says if you want to get back to learning, you don't have to say Shalom Aleichem each stanza 3 times. You can do it 1 time. And we're starting on page 327. That's just a Hagdama to how fast Kiddush should be done. Kiddush should be done as soon as possible. And another reason why you don't want to learn after davening and to make Kiddush, first of all, the people at home also need to make Kiddush. And they also they're waiting on your Kiddush. And the earlier you make Kiddush, it's Harei Meshubach for everyone. So there's a time to learn, there's a time to make Kiddush. The Kiddush is right after Tfilat Arvit. All right. Now that we got that out of the way. Yeah.
Can we walk faster home? You said
Sure.
Shabbat, you shouldn't walk in a usual manner. Can we run home? Can we go fast?
You can run you can run quickly to go to shul, to laven, to learn. You can go to do mitzvot. This is not a problem. No. Running for running's sake, that's an issue. But running for a mitzvah is okay.
Thank you.
Okay. You don't have to run into snow and ice. Take it easy. Get home so you actually get home safe. But you should be you should be moving, right? And I'll say in Regal Park, everybody knows each other. You have all the old booths, and everyone's walking, and every guy sees. And he talks to him for another 2 minutes. He sees the next guy talks another 2 minutes. By the time he gets home, it could be a whole hour, and he walked 1 block. So it goes to problematic.
It says when you get home right away.
No. He says over here. I'm reading what he says. Don't stop and talk to them. Moving home. All right, let's move on.
Okay.
Text Tachem, source number 1. That was just like talking about you should do Kiddush quick. Now let's move on. Where do we know that we have to make Kiddush on Shabbat? So the Gemara Pesachim tells us it's all based on a pasuk. Okay, it says in the pasuk in Shemot 27, Parachav pasuk Zayin, remember Shabbat and to Mekadesh, make it holy. Now, when we translate Zachor, what do we really mean by Zachor Yom HaShoah? What do we mean by the word Zachor? We say remember. What do we actually mean by remembering? What do when we do Amalek? We say Zeichers Amalek. What do we do in order to remember Amalek?
We recite about it.
Right, we mention it. So the word Zachor doesn't just mean to remember; it means to remember by mentioning. Okay, so you have to just remember that the word Zachor Zeicher to remember. It doesn't just mean remembering; it means to mention it. Okay, so Zachor Yom HaShoah Kaddish. Zachor al Hayayin B'chnisasoi says the Gemara in Pesachim. You have to remember it mention it on wine when it comes in. Okay, that's the Gemara in Pesachim that tells us take the cup and make Kiddush on it. Based on it says, okay, now, so Tosfos right there in Pesachim says, the Zechira, Stiv al Hayayin. Because there are psukim in Tanakh, right? There's verses in the Bible that when it says the word of remembrance, Zechira, it mentions wine, right? The first pasuk we may not be so familiar with, Zichro kiyen levavon. Okay, this is a pasuk in Hosea, but there's another pasuk that we should all be familiar with because it's Shir Hashirim, Perik Al pasuk Dalet. Naskira dodecha miyayin. Right? Again, you said the word, right? Zechira, and you talked about wine. Tosfos says that's how the Gemara knows that when it says Zechar Yom HaShabbat Kadesh, it means to do it on wine because the pasuk about Zechira is usually referring to wine. Okay, so that thing we have first, Zechira. The high Zechira, high new Kiddush. Says Tosfot that this remembrance or this mentioning is Kiddush. Now, what's Kiddush? The Tosfot says, Vayechulu, what we say on Friday night, Vayechulu, that's not the real Kiddush yet. Okay, Vayechulu, lo matzina ala kais el b'tfilah. Truth is, Vayechulu is only in Tfilah. Okay, in the Shmona Esrei of Arvit of Shabbat, and then we repeat it afterwards, and then we say it again in Kiddush, but it's not really part of Kiddush. We only say it in order the people who weren't in shul that they should hear it during the Kiddush. But Vayechulu is not part of Kiddush. Now, Tosfos doesn't mention this here, but it's a very important halacha based on this. Just outside the Tzurba for a moment. What happens if a guy didn't make Kiddush Friday night, fell asleep, never made Kiddush? Wakes up the next morning, he has to make Kiddush. Which Kiddush he has to make?
On Friday night.
Friday night. Where does he start?
Same thing?
Nope, he does not. If someone did not recite Kiddush night for some reason, he may still recite it the next day. He should recite the blessing of Bari Priya Gafin, but not the passage of Vayechul. It doesn't say Vayechul. So, but why not? What's the whole shot in Vayechul? Why do we say it on the Friday night? We say 3 times Friday night. Right, but why? What's shot?
Because we finished the beginning of Shabbat.
That's correct. It's about the beginning of Shabbat. And it's the partnership at the beginning of Shabbat.
We finished. We already
says the Ramah,
through it.
Vayechulu is not recited during the day because it refers to Hashem completing the creating the world at the beginning of Shabbat. So Vayechulu is about the beginning of Shabbat. The world is completed. So Shabbos morning, you missed to say the Friday night Kiddush. You make it Shabbos morning, but no Vayechulu. Okay, so Vayechulu is not part of the Kiddush.
No more
We say it because it's about Friday night and the Shabbos came in and the world has been completed. So we say Vayechulu, but it's not really part of Kiddush. Just psukim, like you said. Okay, so that's number 1. Tosfos wants to let us know. Number 2. Okay, now this is the important part. This is going to be about Kiddush Rishonim, and we have to take a look. On top of page 328, Venera says Tosfot, and it appears the Kiddush al Hayayin asmachta, that making Kiddush on a wine, asmachta will translate as a hint, okay, as an allusion, as a hint in the Torah.
From the Torah.
It's not that it has to be on wine. Kiddush is hinted to be on wine. Zechira means yayin, but it's not an obligation on wine. V'hada Amr b'Misha Mesa in the parak that says Nashim chayavas beKiddush hayom dvar Torah hainu daf Kiddush hayom aval al hayayin l'hava elam midrabban. So Tosfos says when the Gemara says that Kiddush hayom is a Torah obligation, Tosfos says that means That's just mentioning.
Shabbos.
We'll get him if good Shabbos is it. Okay, it's Chacham Ben Zion Abba Shaul says that's what it could be. He's just saying Shabbat Shalom. But for the time being, mentioning about Shabbat, that is Kiddush.
With something chashuv, like yain.
Doing it on Yayin, that's the Rabban. According to Tosfot, the Oraita of Kiddush is mentioning it. Right? Similarly, let's take a look at the Rambam. The Rambam in source number 3. So already you have a very big Rishon. You have Tosfot, right? Now you have a second big Rishon. You have the Rambam. The Rambam says, "Mitzvat aseh min haTorah lekadesh yom Shabbat bidvarim," with words. Kiddush is words. Shneimah zachor yom Shabbat lekadesho. K'loimer zachor lezichiras shevach v'kiddush v'tzarich v'scharhu v'knisasai v'tziasai. Right? This is the Rambam Shita. And Kiddush is like Havdalah. You got to remember it on Kiddush. You have to mention it in coming in, and you have to mention it when it's coming out. That's why the Havdalah is in the Tfilat Arvit of Motzei Shabbat. Just like you brought it in with Kiddush in the Tfilah, taking it out. Now, says the Rambam very clearly, Medivrei Sofrim, the rabbis came, and they said, "Lekadish al hayayin, v'lahavdil al hayayin," to make kiddush on wine, and to make havdalah on wine.
Something davar
So the Rambam says it beferush that wine for kiddush is rabbinical. It's not the Torah mitzvah. The Torah mitzvah is to say it with words. Okay, to say Shabbat Shalom, say that this is Shabbat. It's a holy day. That's Kiddush. And to say, and coming out according to the Rambam, there's Havdalah between this and this, this and this, this and that. Just say it. You don't have to make it on wine.
The whole thing without the yain.
Yeah, exactly.
Friday, Thursday, Shabbat Shalom.
Right. It has to be on Shabbos to make Kiddush. Fine. But yeah. All right. So let's look at that box over there. He spells it out very nice. Thus Tosfot and Rambam both maintain that the obligation to use wine is rabbinic in nature. This opinion appears to be supported by the Gemara in Shabbat, right? 23b. Remember the Gemara in Shabbat 23b talks about Hanukkah. The Gemara states that for Shabbat Hanukkah, one who can only afford candles to light or wine for Kiddush should purchase Shabbos candles and then Hanukkah candles. Both of these take precedence over wine, right? Now, that only works out if wine is the Rabbanan. Because if you wanted to say that making Kiddush on wine is the Oraita, then the Gemara can never say buy candles and not wine.
Yeah.
Because if wine was the Oraita, then that would take precedence. Right. However, and everything seems to be working that way, the Kiddush on wine is the Rabbanan, but there's a Ran. And the Ran is the source 4. Let's take a look at source 4. Let's look at source 4, the Ran. The Ran seems to be disagreeing with Toshas and Rambam. The Ran says, how can we override Kiddush of the day, a biblical obligation, because of the candle of the home for Shabbat and the Hanukkah candle? He says, how could the Gemara say, buy candles and not the wine? Seemingly, he understands that wine is the Oraita for the Kiddush. He says, you know why? You know why they're letting you not buy the wine? The ha'efshel likutshe arifta, because you can make Kiddush on bread, right? But he says, if not for the peace in the home, if it wasn't for Pesumei Nisa and it wasn't for Shalom Bayis, then obviously you would need the wine, because it says so the Ran is saying like this, right? What are we trying to imply from the Ran? The Ran is saying, how could you say buy the candles? You should buy wine, because wine is you need it to make Kiddush, and it's part of the Kiddush, meaning that it's the Oraita. So he says, you know what? You could get away with making Kiddush on bread. Therefore, buy the candles. So you have bread, you can buy the candles, you can make Kiddush on bread. But seemingly, he is implying that Kiddush on wine itself, that is a Doraita. Whether you have to drink the wine or not, that's another Homa focus.
Why doesn't it?
But
why doesn't bring
Now the Bet Yosef,
Bring a pasuk. It's from the right.
read the box over here. The Ran seems to imply that one must declare the sanctuary Shabbat verbally together with either wine or bread in order to fulfill his biblical obligation, which would contrast with the Rambam and Tosfot. The Bet Yosef writes similarly to the Ran. In Orach Chaim 688, the Bet Yosef writes what the Ran writes, that seemingly the Kiddush on wine is the Oraita. You need the wine. And all the other Rishonim, such as Rashi, the Ravan, the Rashba, appear to maintain the obligation to recite Kiddush on wine or Challah is the Oraita. So you have the Rashi, the Ravan, the Rashba, the Rif. Seemingly the Bet Yosef all say that you need wine to make Kiddush, and that's part of actual Kiddush.
But the Ran came after Rambam.
Okay, but yeah, it's a Rishonim. Okay, the Beit Chadash, the Bach, right? The Bach is Rav Yoel Sirkis in Poland. He is the father-in-law of the Taz. Very good. So the Bet Yosef, he writes as follows. The Bet Yosef writes, he says, like the Ran writes, and they seemingly imply that Kiddush on wine is the Oraita. But he says, you know what? Maybe that's not what the Ran meant, and it's not what the Bet Yosef meant. We're implying it. They didn't say that in many, many words, but we're implying that's what they said. So he says, maybe not. He says, rather it means that it's possible to recite Kiddush verbally without wine, and the same applies to reciting Kiddush without bread. Okay, so what did the Bach just do? The Bach said, when the Ran said, you know why you don't need wine? Because you can make it on bread. The Ran meant you don't need wine because you can make it on bread, or you can make it even without bread, but just saying words. The Ran never meant to say it must be on wine. The Ran just said there's ways out without wine. Bread is one way out, but he also meant words is another way out without wine. And therefore, you don't have to buy the wine, you can buy the candle. Okay? That's what the Bach wants to say. Bach says there's no implication in the Ran, or the Bet Yosef for that matter, that you need to make it on wine. It's just saying that if you don't have wine, you can use bread. If you don't have bread, you can just say it. That's what the Bach wants to do here. So look at the box on the bottom over there. According to the Bach, the Ran, the Bet Yosef means that one fulfills the mitzvah, the right of Kiddush, when reciting the bracha, sacrifice, right, even when no wine is available. In which case, one will recite Kiddush and Challah. Moshe Levi agrees that Bet Yosef would not have taken a position contrary to the Rambam, but he explains his wording differently. Since the prior mitzvah of Kiddush is biblical, we would have expected that even the rabbinic aspects of Kiddush, such as using wine, take precedence over lighting Hanukkah candles, which is entirely rabbinic. So what Moshe Levi is saying, and this is Menuchat Ahava, look right over here. He says in source 3, page 330, source 6, Lefi dati near Shagam Maran Modilazeh. He says it must be that the Maran Bet Yosef agrees to this. Should Darchik Leimer Shemaran Shehune Eman Beitol Shel Harambam Kiyadua. You know, the Shulchan Aruch, the Rambam says something. The Shulchan Aruch is going with the Rambam. He's not going to go with the Ran. So Yichot Allah Bestam and Nefshay is going to argue with him just by himself. Ufrat Shadat Roib Kol Rishonim Shekiddush Al Yain Einu Min HaTorah El B'Divrei Sofrim, and especially that so many Rishonim say that Kiddush on wine is rabbinic. So he says that what the question of the Ran was that the Ran was saying perhaps you would think that the wine that's rabbinic for the Kiddush should still take precedence over candles. Why? Because it's a mitzvah that's associated with the Doraita mitzvah. Meaning there's a Doraita mitzvah of Kiddush. You're right on words. And then the Rabbanan said, put wine in it. So perhaps that rabbinic mitzvah that's intertwined with the Doraita mitzvah should take precedence over your Shabbos candles and take precedence over your Hanukkah candles. But the Gemara says no. The Gemara says Psurim Misa and Shalom Bayis is greater than that. Right? And that was the whole question. That's the way to understand it. That's Rav Moshe Levi in explaining that the Ran, or not the Ran, the Shulchan Aruch is not arguing, and the Shulchan Aruch would agree with the Rambam. So comes out based on the way the Bach and the and the Menuchat Ahava, Tosfos and Rambam, that Kiddush On wine, that's the Rabbanan.
I can say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to show, like, maybe first of all, Kiddush, we don't see in the Torah or in the Tanakh any place about Kiddush.
Gemara said,
Okay.
where it says Acharat Yom Shabbat Lekadesh. That's the source for
but
Kiddush.
we don't see any story or anybody
Ah,
does
okay.
the Kiddush or something like this. And even Pesach, it comes in Yetziat Mitzrayim. Pesach comes before Shabbat, right? And we do what we do, Arba Kosot. In Pesach, they didn't do Arba Kosot. Arba Kosot came only in the time of Ezra. Ezra, he's the one he built the Haggadah. Yeah, established the whole Seder, the whole Haggadah. So until then, they didn't have any Kiddush on the thing. So I'm just saying, it's,
so you say the proof is that it's the Rabbanan.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no stories.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, so the box over here says, for this reason, there's a broad consensus among Achronim. The obligation to recite Kiddush over wine is rabbinic in nature. So what we've come to the conclusion amongst most Achronim, and apparently the opinion of most Rishonim, is that Kiddush alayayin is the Rabbanon. The Kiddush that's the Oraita is saying those words. Now, Mogin Avraham wants to say venerally, if you're telling me now that Kiddush is just words, venerally, the Medoraita b'Kiddush sha'amar b'tfilah sagi, that the Kiddush that we said in the davening by Chul,
Enough.
that's Kiddush. That's already Kiddush. The Kruk Tziv, the Chartim Shabbos, he remembered it. He mentioned it. Now the Kiddush from Malkam Suda, don't tell me that, because that's Rabbanan Tiknu. That's all rabbinic. Right? The Kiddush from Malkam Suda, that's already it's a rabbinical mitzvah. Because of the Rabbeinu Tam, Mishain Lo Yayin, Lo Yikadosh Klal. It says a person doesn't have wine, he shouldn't make Kiddush at all. He says that's one who doesn't have wine should not recite Kiddush at all. You should make it on bread, right? But this seems difficult. He says, 1 second. How can the Gemara say don't make Kiddush at all? It's a Doraita mitzvah. You tell me you have no food, don't make Kiddush. You have no wine, don't make Kiddush. It's a Doraita. Says the Magen Avram, Ila Karchach the die b'tefillah. That really Kiddush is enough with tefillah. And when they say don't make Kiddush, if you don't have what to make Kiddush with, it's because you don't have nothing to have. So you don't make a second Kiddush. But your Kiddush and tefillah, that's the Kiddush. And when they say Kiddush, Havdalah is like Kiddush, that means the same thing. That Havdalah could be done with tefillah. Right? In the davening, we make the Havdalah, and that's enough. So the Magen Avraham said, you're telling me that Kiddush is words? Well, guess what? We're being Yotze Kiddush in the davening. That's the Magen Avraham. Now, the Mishnah Brura, based on this, says, Al Ken, therefore, Im Safek Lo, Im Kiddush, Olo, Eno Tzarich, Lichzor V'Lekadesh. The Sfekad Rabbanan, Likula. So what happens here? This guy, he davened. Then he came home, he started his
We're
Su'udah.
talking about only if he's by himself.
Hold on.
Only by himself.
This is the case. He davened, came home, started his Su'udah, doesn't know, I made Kiddush, I didn't make Kiddush. He's not sure. Does he have to make another Kiddush?
For his family.
Says the Mishnah Brura, it's a Safek Rabbanan. Why? Because he already made the Deoraita Kiddush in his Tefillah. If he made his Deoraita Kiddush in Tefillah, and now he's Misupik, I make Kiddush or not before my Suda, well, that whole Kiddush is the Rabbanan. So, Safek de Rabbanan is Likula. You don't have to make another Kiddush.
What about his family?
So very good.
Now he says, did I take it or didn't take it?
What about his family?
Family.
So let's say his family wasn't there, or let's say his family's all sleeping. They don't pay attention. No one knows what's going on.
They
All
want to eat.
Okay. All right. So fine. He's sitting alone. It's okay. He's sitting alone. Fine. Whatever. He's not sure.
Exactly. If he's alone, that's
You're saying the practicality of the case. I'm telling you what the halacha is. Okay, how the case happens. That's how it happens. Okay. Now the Mishnah Brura wants to say an interesting kiddush over here, and he says, if you're telling me now that kiddush on the wine is the rabbanon, so says the Mishnah Brura, gam de koton shehagia lechinuch yachol lehotzi lefizeh afilu legadol. B'kiddush, Im hagadol hispalel kvar. For Allah is not like that. Allah is not like that. Well, let's understand what the Mishnah Berurah says. The Mishnah Berurah says, if you're telling me now that when the gadol davens, when the person is davening,
And he doesn't have to do again.
that's his kiddush, the oraita. The kiddush that he's doing on wine now is the rabbanon. So the child whose mitzvah of kiddush is also the rabbanon, then the child should be able to fulfill the obligation of the adult's kiddush post tefillah, because it's also the rabbanon. Now this type of sugya is also found with Kriyas Megillah and other places where you want to cut into a yaitza, and we're saying they're both the rabbanon. The problem with this is that the katan's chiv de rabbanon is not a real chiv de rabbanon per se. Why? Why not? Even they're both rabbinic. He has a mitzvah rabbinic and he has a mitzvah rabbinic. What's the difference?
He doesn't have a chiv.
Why not? What's his chiv?
It's a lower level Rabbanan obligation.
Why?
It's chinuch.
Says
Chinuch is a lower obligation than an adult having a rabbinic obligation.
The father has to train his child to observe the mitzvot, and it's not a personal obligation on the child, right? So even though there is a mitzvah rabbanon for the child to hear kiddush or to say the kiddush, but it's a mitzvah al chinuch, and it's not an actual mitzvah de rabbanon, right? The same thing applies with Megillah. They bring the same thing. Can it come to the Megillah? It's rabbinic. It's rabbinic.
He's not obligated.
It's not. It's a different rabbinic. There are different levels of rabbinic. Okay, very good. So we got that out of the way. So what do we come out with right now? We had the Magen Avraham that said that if you make Kiddush and Tefillah, saying Tefillah is Kiddush, right? So the Kiddush you're doing afterwards, the Rabbanan. Based on this, the halacha is, if you're not sure you made Kiddush by your Suda, you don't have to go make it again. Because you did the right to Kiddush and Tefillah, and the Kiddush during the Suda is the Rabbanan, something the Rabbanan. Fine. Now, the Bir Halacha says, I have two questions on all this. It says, the Gemara Pesachim that says, Amr Rav Bar Yaakov, V'tzarech lehiskir yetzias Mitzrayim b'kiddush hayom.
Hayom.
Kiddush hayom means kiddush. Means the kiddush.
Yeah.
So he says you have to mention Zecher yetzias Mitzrayim.
So you did in Tefillah.
Where?
In the shul.
Where?
In the shul.
Where?
You did by
That's right. There is no Zecher yetzias Mitzrayim in the Friday night Shmona Esrei. There's no Zecher yetzias Mitzrayim in the Friday night Shmona Esrei.
There is no.
No, take it out and look at it. Doesn't say. It says Zecher Matzah Bereishis. Doesn't say Zecher yetzias Mitzrayim. So what does Shema count? Right now, I didn't say the word Shema. I said in the Shmona Esrei. Right. There are those who want to count the Shema, the Vayomer, as being close to the Shmona Esrei, so it should count.
Right.
But we'll see what to do. But one minute, that's his first question. He says, Rav Bar Yaakov says you have to mention Zecher yetzias Mitzrayim in Kiddush. And in the Kiddush that we're doing in Shmona Esrei, which is the Vaychulu in Friday night Shmona Esrei, there is no Zecher yetzias Mitzrayim. So that's the Bir Halacha's first question. The Bir Halacha's second question is, 1 second. The Oraita mitzvahs need kavanah. So if you're telling me that my Kiddush in Shmona Esrei is fulfilling my Doraita mitzvah, then maybe I should have kavanah to fulfill Kiddush in that Shmona Esrei. So that's the two questions of the Bir Halacha. So question number one, where's Zecher yetzias Mitzrayim? Second question is, where's my kavanah to be Yaitza Kiddush? So Rav Moshe Levi in his Menuchat Ahava, he writes as follows. First of all, he says, 1 second. In Vaychu, there is no Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. Yesh Lemer she'en zeh le'ukva. It's there's not Ma'akiv. Rak the Rabbanon. Who's saying you have to say Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim? This is Rav Bar Yaakov. This is an additional rabbinic addition to Kiddush. Right? There's Kiddush Hayom mentioning Shabbos. And Rav Yaakov said, mention Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. So that's the Rabbanon. If you're talking to me about the Oraita mitzvah, it's saying that today's Shabbos and it's a holy day. And I did that. So don't worry about the Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim.
Because he's right. You know why? Because every night we say Zecher L'Tzias Mitzrayim. So how come in Erev Shabbat we don't say it? So and we said in the Kiddush.
Who? Rav Yaakov?
No. I'm saying everybody, every night.
We said it in the Shema. I said it in Vayomer.
תפילת 18, we said זכר יציאת מצרים.
Where? Which one is it?
ב-18, של ערבית, we don't say?
Where?
No, בגאל ישראל, we don't say?
Gal Yisrael. Gal
Okay.
Yisrael is
No,
different.
it's part of the tefillah.
But is it part of Shemon Esrei? Okay. Now, this is not in the Tzurba Rabbanim, but there is a Torah Tamima. And the Torah Tamima, he says, okay, 1 second. Where did Rav Acher Bar Yaakov, where is he mentioning this? So you go back to this Gemara in Pesachim that says, Rav Acher Bar Yaakov says, in Kiddush, you have Zeichel Tziyas Mitzrayim. That whole page is talking about Pesach night. Not about Shabbos night. It's about Pesach night. And Pesach night, that's the day you talk about Zeichel Tziyas Mitzrayim. So the whole thing of having to say Zeichel Tziyas Mitzrayim, that's Pesach night. Now, we might say we do say Zeichel Tziyas Mitzrayim in our Kiddush. We're learning, like those who want to say that perhaps he means every Friday night, but that's not necessarily the way the Gemara should be learned. And he says, and therefore it's not an issue, right? Therefore, if you don't say Zeichel Mitzrayim in the Shemona Esrei of Shabbos, it's still
every day. Every day, somewhere.
Okay, fine. The Kaf HaChaim deals with the second question. The second question of Bir Halacha was, what about my kavanah? Kaf HaChaim says what? He says, 1 second. You're davening Shemona Esrei. What does that mean? Kivan de kavanoso haisel l'shem tefillah Shabbos. You're davening Shemona Esrei tefillah Shabbos, and your kavanah is to daven the Shemona Esrei, right? Utefillah Shabbos tzarich lehiskir bo Shabbos, and in the Shemona Esrei of Shabbos, you have to mention Shabbos. Memela yoytze nami yidei kavanah kiddush, right? It's you don't need an extra kavanah for Kiddush, says the Kaf HaChaim. He's like, you're davening Shemona Esrei, and part of the Shemona Esrei is mentioning Shabbos, and mentioning Shabbos is Kiddush. So Memela, you had kavanah for the Kiddush in the Shemona Esrei, and therefore that deals with that question of the Bir Halacha. So in the box over there on page 332, in other words, since the Torah obligation of Kiddush is merely to make a verbal declaration regarding Shabbat, making such a declaration is also integral to Shabbat prayers. The intent to recite the Shabbat prayer is equivalent to the intent to perform the biblical mitzvah of Kiddush. Okay, so coming out, according to the Kaf HaChaim, the Fatahava, question of the Bir Halacha is not there. And the Magen Abraham's idea, and that Kiddush in Shemona Esrei and the Tefillah, that is the right to Kiddush, seems to be standing. Okay, so interesting. They note two things over here. First of all, source 12 and source 13 are the exact same source. This looks like to be a typo error over here. They must have just copied and pasted the same thing again. But let's take a look at the source. Interesting source. I tried to look it up in the Yalkut Yosef and other Sephardic sources. I didn't see anyone really mention this, but if you have a source, you can tell me. But the Chatam Sofer says, he says, what about Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur is a very holy day, right? And you should make Kiddush on Yom Kippur. But you can't make Kiddush on wine, so make sure to have Dafka Kavana, that when you're davening the night Yom Kippur, and you're talking about the holiness of the day, have Kavana that you're making Kiddush there. And then says the Chatam Sofer in source 12, look at the bottom, page 332. Ushabasos de Almo, lo yichaven l'tzeis b'tefillah. Don't have Kavana to fulfill your Kiddush in Tefillah. Right, this is Chatam Sofer saying. Yom Kippur, have Kavana to fulfill your Kiddush in the Shemona Esrei. Shabbos, don't. In order that you fulfill the obligation of Kiddush Shabbos, Mina Muvchar, the way the Rabbanan wanted us to fulfill the mitzvah, al the Yayin. So it's like on the opposite approach to the Magen Avraham. Magen Avraham was like, you davening Shemona Esrei, you did Kiddush already. Chatam Sofer is davening Shemona Esrei, Dafka, don't have Kavana for Kiddush, so you can make a Kiddush on the wine. Now this might be related to the Minchas Chinuch. The Minchas Chinuch has this idea, number of places, but he says as follows. He says, when you have a Doraisa mitzvah Doraita, and the Rabbanon came and made takanas to that mitzvah of how it should be fulfilled, when it should be fulfilled, where it should be fulfilled, the Minchas Chinuch wants to go with the idea that if you don't do it the way the Rabbanon said to do it, then you did not fulfill even the mitzvah d'oraita. Right? We usually understand there's a mitzvah d'oraita, and then the Rabbanan added extra. If you didn't do what the Rabbanan added, you still fulfill the mitzvah d'oraita. That's the way we usually understand d'oraita Rabbanan. The Minchas Chinuch understands it differently. He says once you have a mitzvah d'oraisa, right, and the Rabbanan came and made takanas to that mitzvah, then if you don't fulfill it to the way the Rabbanan wanted you to fulfill it, you didn't do it even the mitzvah d'oraisa. To make chizik to what the word. Okay, fine. So perhaps my thought was the Chassam Sofer is going with this minchas that what the mitzvah min mukhar, the way the Rabbanan wanted us to make kiddush was to make kiddush alayayin, so then don't have kavanah in the Shemona Esrei for kiddush. So this way you can make kiddush the way the Rabbanan wants you to make kiddush. Mitzvah min. Okay, that's the Chassam Sofer. Shevet Levi and Shalosh Shu is Shevet Levi, if it wasn't there, says the exact same thing. He says, don't have kavanah in davening. He says, don't have kavanah in davening for kiddush, and you should make kiddush on the wine, the way the Rabbanan wanted us to make.
The one that made up the whole order. The other one that said first to Shemona Esrei and then do Kiddush.
Right.
I would say,
No, so the Magen Avram was saying that davening Shemona Esrei, just by saying the word, that's kiddush, memela, done. So they want to say, no, you shouldn't want to do that. You should make kiddush the way kiddush should be done. I hear you.
oh, don't do what Chachamim wanted. What do you mean? The Chachamim did it to serve themselves. This is how they created it. And now you're saying,
So, well, hold on. Can a person make kiddush without davening mar, without davening arvit? So there's possible to make kiddush.
But the point is.
So you're saying they were talking to make tefillat arvit before kiddush? Not really, necessarily. I don't know. That's the way the order we do it, but perhaps I don't know. Correct, but do you need to? Can you make kiddush without it? You can't make kiddush without. So there it is. So there's technicalities. All right, I don't want to get this. I'm just bringing you the sides. You have the Magen Avraham. You have this. Like I said, by the Sephardic sources, I didn't find any source like this. But it doesn't mean that it's not there. Just I couldn't find it.
Levi's kind of saying in terms of you have kavanah during the then you might have an issue with
right, but he says you can ain't right. He ends off by saying there's a lot of pilpul here, says Rav Wasner. A lot of thought about this, go back and forth, you can argue on this, but he says this is not the place for it, so we'll move on. But based on what we learned over here, the Yalkut Yosef, you have the source here, source 15, but I want to read it from the English edition over here, and I'll read it in the Hebrew in the English edition. I like the way they phrased it over here. Okay, so what did we say now? We said if a person davens, we're going to go with the Magen Avraham. Person prays, is ready, the Kiddush is done in the prayer. So based on this, says the Yalkut Yosef, someone is a guest by people who are not so careful in halacha. The guy making kiddush doesn't really know that he has to be yotzimi in kiddush, right? Or a person himself is not sure if he made kiddush or not. He doesn't have to make kiddush.
So yetza.
Once he prayed arvit, Umin ha-Torah yotzei yedei chaves kiddush tefillah, like the Magen Avraham, right? That your yotzei your kiddush in the davening. Umash etzarich l'kadosh al hayayin hu midrabanan. So this whole kiddush now that we're doing before the Suda is derabanan. Mamela avilei safek derabanan b'lekula. This is a safek derabanan lekula. So you're not sure if this guy's having kavanah for you or not. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. You're not sure. You're not sure if you make kiddush or not. You don't have to make kiddush again.
I'm not sure if he said all the words. Sometimes it skips words.
Why? Okay, so we didn't get into the woman yet. We'll deal with the woman shortly. It's the next few pages. Give me a few minutes. You have to go slowly. You have to go step by step.
So now you
Hold
say
on.
something very, very big, because many times I see like we are in places and there is a person make a kiddush for everybody, and then you see a few people like, oh, his kiddush was not good enough for me, so they go and do for themselves a kiddush.
It's not only
So
Not only in big places, you can sit down.
so
Sometimes you can sit at a table at home, and there are
so-
different families there, and
so
they make
listen.
their own kiddush.
So this is a bracha shenat simcha.
Depends.
Well, you just said it now.
I mean, it sounds like
Bracha shenat simcha.
but there was a time once.
All right, let me finish reading this. A minute. He says as follows: Ufrat, have a suffix. The have a sveik sveika. Shem kiddush. Shem yotzi lecha v'so b'tfila. Vav b'sha amr shetzarach lahaska b'kiddush yes mitzrayim. Oh, so here we go into this thing. Even though we said Racha Bar Yaakov said in Gemara Mesachim, you have to mechaz zeichat yes mitzrayim. Utfilat al b'sha Shabbat ein sham zeichat yes mitzrayim. Yesh leimer shekol zeh midrabanan. That was the Menuchat Ha'avar, Moshe Levi, right? The whole thing of the second Sabbath is the Rabbanon. V'kra asmachta ba'almahu, and the whole thing is a asmachta, all hints. But oh, shekivan shehisker, and this is what I believe Merichai wanted to say, or someone there wanted to say. Shekivan shehisker yitzias mitzrayim b'kriya shema ve'emes ve'emuna v'samach gula tefila nechshav like ki'ilu hisker yitzias mitzrayim b'tefila. Somehow, whatever you said before Shmona Esrei, before the Kiddush, in Vaychulu, in the Shmona Esrei, all those paragraphs before, somehow you mentioned Zechas Yet Mitzrayim, and it all adds up. There's a Kiddush Mitzrayim. The answer to the Chayv is a Kiddush Minatara. We call Malcolm. Im Yachol Tov Sheishma HaKiddush Mivish V'Vadai Loi Kiddush V'Yotzei Dei Chayv is Kiddush. Still, you can hear it from somebody, right? He's a super guy, make Kiddush, didn't make Kiddush. Find someone who didn't make Kiddush, you had to listen to him. Now, Ve'im nistapek im Kiddush va'adayin lo hitpel arvit. Let's say this guy he started his su'udah, ate it. And then, I made Kiddush, I didn't make Kiddush. And now he says, oh, forget Kiddush, I didn't even daven yet. So now he has to pray arvit. So now what is he saying?
Yikavem b'tfilah.
Yikavem b'tfilato letzet yidei chovat Kiddush, v'yamar b'tfilah. Acha zecher l'maaseh bereshit, after zecher l'maaseh bereshit, right away say, so when you're doing Arvit at the point that you know that you have to rely on the Kiddush and the Arvit, so then say Zecher L'Tziat Mitzrayim right after saying Zecher L'Maaseh Bereshit.
What's the film?
I don't understand the question.
Yeah. If I remember, if I did
the guy,
then
he doesn't know if he made his Kiddush or not. Then he realizes they didn't pray Arvit.
No,
so pray Arvit and mentions Zecher L'Maaseh Mitzrayim. That's what I said.
Yeah, like you said.
Okay. All right, fine. We'll leave that at that. Okay, so we came out that seems to be that the Shmona Esrei of Shabbos night, that's where the Kiddush Doraita is done. And what we're doing at home is Kiddush Tzurba. Okay, at least for us, those who prayed Arvit. All right, now we're starting in page 335. Merichai mentioned the woman. Okay, so now we're going to get into the woman. What about the woman? The Gemara Brachos, Daf Chaf Amud Bet. Amar Rav Adar Torah 16 in page 335. Nashim Chayavis B'Kiddush Hayom Dvar Torah. That's a Dvar Torah. It's the Doraita. Women are Mechuyev in Kiddush. Gemara says, Amai. Why? Mitzvah says, she's my grandma. Home mitzvah says, she's my grandma. Nashim B'Torahs. The Nashim are Potter to Mitzvah my grandma. So this is the classic time-bound mitzvah. It comes once every 7 days. The time-bound mitzvah. So Amar Abaya. Abaya says, you're right. They're Rabbanim. All right, but this is not one of the cases that we pass in like Rabbi. So Amar Le Rava, but Dvar Torah Kamar. You just Rav Adar Hava said it's a Dvar Torah. It's a biblical commandment. It's not a rabbinic commandment. Eil Amar Rava. Amar Kra says Zachor at Yom HaShabbat, and then it says Shemar. Kol shishno b'shmirah, shishno b'skira. Those who are responsible to watch Shabbat, guard Shabbat, right? And even though keeping Shabbat is a mitzvah shezman grama that comes once every 7 days, when it comes to Eloisa say, there is no, you're not potter, even if it's zman grama. It's only mitzvah say, right? So therefore, since they're chiv on the shmira of Shabbos, they're also going to be mechuyev in the schiras of Shabbos or making kiddush.
Also ktanim.
Packaged.
Also ktanim. Shmira, skira.
Again, katan is based on chinuch, so it's a different level. Okay, the Kolbo, source 17 on page 336. Says interestingly, if she knows how to make kiddush, she can make her own kiddush. She doesn't, you can make kiddush for her. She can also be
Men.
She can fulfill the men's obligation of kiddush. Why? Because her kiddush is d'oraita. The men's kiddush is d'oraita, so everything fits. Okay, we'll have to get into this arvud of being guarantors for another. We'll get that into the next section. But for now, just let's take a look at Shulchan Aruch. Nashim chayavas b'kiddush. Av pishu mitzvah seshes man grama b'shum. The itkesh make a hekesh zachar l'shemar, and therefore they are chayav in that also. Umotziot et ha'anashim, and they become moitzi the men hayav v'chayavas min haTorah kimosam, since their mitzvah is the oraita just like them. And in the Mishnah Berurah, source 19, it's embarrassing or not befitting for her to get up and make kiddush for the whole big crowd. If they're not part of her bnei beisa,
Especially if she's going to sing.
Okay, what anyone add? Okay, so that's what we have over here, and that's the halacha. The pashtus, the woman has the right of it's a kiddush, and she can make her own kiddush. She could be yoytze kiddush for others. I just want to see what I wrote down over here. Right, he writes here in the Sefer L'Chayolim of Yonatan Naxon, however, for modesty reasons, it's a verbal that she not, unless there is a need to do so, and no one can fulfill it. He writes interestingly a little more over here. He writes, moreover, if the man of the house cannot drink the wine of the kiddush, right, for whatever reasons, the man can't drink the wine, then it's better to have the kiddush recited by a woman, if there's no other man available, rather than have the man recite the kiddush and let the woman only drink the wine. He brings us from the halacha berurah that we just said. So he's saying that
but many times the rabbi said the kiddush and he gives to somebody else.
He gives to the children to drink.
To drink.
Right.
So was it?
Tisha B'Av and stuff like that. Kidding, you have
No
fish meals and stuff like that. Right. Okay, we're gonna take a look. He's saying the Ashkenaz shuls, when they make kiddush in the shul, right? They make the kiddush and they give it to the child to drink it.
This is something else because they don't want to be yotzei. But I'm talking about
let's move on.
Regular places.
You know, I'm gonna tell you this is a shorter share than the other ones, but I think so we need a lot of time for it. Okay. All right. Now, so the title of this section is, may one who already recited Kiddush recite it again on behalf of others. What's this based on? We know that if it's a bracha on a mitzvah, someone who's already fulfilled the mitzvah could still be mitzi somebody else. Right? Like you have shofar. You're yotze shofar, you can say bracha again for someone else to make shofar. Megillah. Right? There are those mitzvahs. Brachas of a mitzvah. Now, you have Birkat Hanen. You have Birkat of pleasures, of foods, and stuff like that. So, a guy wants to eat an apple. So, Isaac here wants to eat an apple. Can I make the bracha for Isaac, and Isaac goes eats the bracha, eats the apple?
No.
So it doesn't work that way. In order for a bracha on a food item to be working for me and you, means I have to eat, you have to eat. Okay, so now the question comes by Kiddush. Why? What is Kiddush? Is Kiddush a Birkat mitzvah, meaning it's a mitzvah, right? To make Kiddush. We said it is. Part of the Kaddish show, right? But at the same time, part of Kiddush, the Rabbanan set it up, is that you have to make a very a jofen, right? A gefen, right? Okay. So it's a food item. But it's
not on the substance. The Kiddush is on the Shabbat. Something more.
You're right. So let's take a look. Sachas Rosh Hashanah, source 20. Tana have a great verb. Zera. Kol brachas kulan Al bishayata moitzi. Even though you already fulfilled it, you can write to others. Chutz mibrachas mivirkas alechem mivirkas hayayin. Shem lo yatza moitzi v'im yatza enu moitzi. If you didn't yet fulfill, he can do it for someone else. If he fulfilled, he can't do it for someone else. Boira. Birkat alechem shel mitzvah. Or birkat hayayin shel kiddush hayom mahu. What about Kiddush? Kivin the chovahu mafik or dimel bracha lav chayvahi. Right? Is it a birkat henehenin? Is it something that we're enjoying and you have to be in it to fulfill it for someone else, or it's a birkat chayv? Tashma dam Rav Ashi ki havina be Rav Papi hava mekadosh lan yichi hava ate arisa medavra of mekadosh lahu. He says, Rav Papi, he would recite Kiddush for us, and then when his tenants would come, he would recite Kiddush again for them, teaching us that what? Kiddush is like a Birkat mitzvah. So even though it's on the yayin, even though you're making Birkat Abori Priya Gafen, it's still considered like a Birkat mitzvah, and therefore you can make Kiddush, and then you can make Kiddush again for someone else.
I think I don't know what you're saying here, but that rule that if it's a mitzvah, in this case the mitzvah is to keyboard, right?
I'm going back to the deeper. Okay. Oh, Arvut. Okay, so we're gonna get into Arvut now.
Mitzvah. We're on a mitzvah that the mitzvah gufa is just the.
Okay, you're going back. You're putting Dibur Arvut together.
It has to.
Okay.
In other words, the whole part we named it as the whole reason why we gave somebody else because Arvut, not because of what's it called, because I could be using something because it's a mitzvah. Because generally, if the mitzvah is Dibur,
Then you can't be. Okay, fine. All right. Now, so Ravami brought up a good point over here of the Arvut. So you have here the Gul Mir Vava. Right, this is the commentary on the Noda B'Yehuda, right? And he writes over here. Look at the bottom of the box on page 337. A man who davens Arvit already fulfilled the biblical mitzvah of Kiddush. Right? If the woman in this household do not daven Arvit, then her obligation is what? D'oraita. Whereas his mitzvah is now rabbinic. If so, may he recite Kiddush on their behalf. That's the Dagam Merva. So let's take what he says. He says, "Mashani mistapet." This is what I'm talking about here. This is what I'm in doubt. Right. That's a Gemara. That was a Gemara. So what's his suffix? His suffix is, let's take a look. He says, now I'm in doubt. Even if a man recites Kiddush on behalf of his wife and family members, if the woman did not daven Arvit and the man already daven Arvit, and therefore the man is not obligated biblically, and the women who did not daven are obligated biblically, whether they can fulfill the obligation of hearing from the man. He's saying she has a Doraita chiyuv of Kiddush. And his is the Rabbanon, right? So perhaps the Rabbanon cannot cover her chiyuv Doraita. Right. It's not on the same level. Usually when we say one person did a mitzvah, he can say the bracha again for someone else because there's arbut, we're guarantors for one another. We're responsible for each other to make the mitzvah. Shekoy saw Rebim Zebazet. Moshe calls it Rashi. Okay. But he writes, "V'harei ksav harosh, the mesechles brachas of Perek Gimel, shehaisha enu b'chlal arvut," that the woman is not in arvut; she's not a guarantor. Lekach enu motzia elu misha chiyuvay midrabanan. Therefore, she may only perform a mitzvah on behalf of one whose obligation is rabbinic. So he's saying on the other side now that a woman can never be yotzi a man, because she doesn't have a din of arbut, and so she's not a guarantor for the man. She can't be going to the man's kiddush. We already saw that's not the law, but that's what his thought process over here is. And he says, but now I have a question. What does it mean she's not b'chla arvut? Does this mean that she's not a guarantor on behalf of others? Ha'anoshim, she kiblu arvus b'har grizim b'har evo, this arvu gam be'ad hanoshim, meaning the Rosh said the women are not in the arvut, not guarantors. What does that mean? The women's not guarantors for us, for the men, and back that way also the men are not guarantors for them, or the women are not guarantors for us, but we as men became the guarantors for other men and for the women. Like, where's the guarantor? How far does it go? What does it mean the women are not guarantors? Right? That's his question here as well. So he has this whole idea over here. The Rabbi Akiva Eiger, in source number 22, he says, he says, in my humble opinion, there is no difference in guarantees. Everyone's guaranteed. We never found anywhere else that if a woman cannot fulfill someone else's obligation. He says, so what's the Rosh talking about? When the Rosh said that there is no guarantor by woman, what was he saying? So rather, it pays attention to the Rosh is the guarantorship is accepted only insofar you have to be in the gather of the mitzvah to be yaitz to someone else, right? And the Rosh, where the Rosh brought it down, the women not guarantors. You got to read the context of where the Rosh brought it. He brought it in the halachot of Birkat Hamazon. The Gemara saw in Birkat Hamazon, right? And the question is women obligated Birkat Hamazon, right? Because they don't have brit, Torah they don't have to learn, right? So are they part of the Birkat Hamazon? And so the Rosh said that's why a woman can't fulfill the obligation of a man in Birkat Hamazon because there's no arvut there. Not that there's no arvut for women in general. It's just not in Birkat Hamazon. Since they're relevant to it, but for the mitzvah in which they're not obligated, right? So you have to read the context. Something very important all the time. Whenever you're learning, what is the context of what you're learning? Where are you saying it? You can't just apply it everywhere if it's talking about a specific case. Okay, now, so we still have this first question of the Dagam Merababa, which was if the husband is coming home and he already prayed, so his Kiddush is derabanan, and the woman's Kiddush is deraita. So says Chacham Ben Tzion Abashul, what he's saying, the Shal Shu is Orlet Tzion. He says, Gam b'oifen she'isha lo yispalo, yachol abal lo tzio ta yedei chavis Kiddush. He can still do it. It can still work. But he says, M'kol makom, tov she'isha ta'amar Shabbos Shalom. Say Shabbat Shalom. Uvezeh tetze yedei chavis Kiddush min haTorah. Why? Because we said the whole Kiddush is dibur, dvarim, just words. So she said Shabbat Shalom. She sanctified Shabbat in that sense. So now v'kach hayu shneim chayovim midrabanan bilvad. So now they're both the chayav is derabanan. So there's no question, right? He's saying even if it was not, even if she didn't, it could still be yaitzer her. Mishum arvut, I guess.
What does it mean, Shabbat Shalom?
Shabbat Shalom means Shabbat is holy and peaceful, and it's complete. Shalom. This is it. This is nice. And here in the Biur Halacha, he says, "V'hinei re'iti b'chidushei Rabbi Akiva Eiger shemistapek de'ulai yoytze mitzvahs aseh b'amiras shabtat tava bilvad v'lepela de'arei Rambam kosa devinin zchir Shabbos shevach v'kiddush." Because the Rambam we had earlier said you have to do shevach v'kiddush. And where's the shevach over here? Where's the kiddush over here? Right? I don't know. So he says he's mistopik on this, the Biur Halacha. Okay, let's now take a look at the Alka Joseph for a moment to see how this all applies. So he writes over here. The Birkat Hamazon, a woman cannot fulfill the obligation of the man because perhaps the woman is not involved, is not obligated to write in Birkat Hamazon. Because of no delacha, or it says with our Brit and with the Torah, and Tosfos says that the women don't have that. So
because the man also is supposed to bring food. Not the,
I don't know what to tell you. That's what the
not
Gemara
the
says. That's what
woman.
Taisa says. They're not in the get of it. That's why they're not
What-
considered their
what
right.
about the man? He's obligated to bring the food and not the
Okay.
woman.
What he says over here is as follows.
But if he ate kazait, she can be more. Because they're on the same level.
No, it's not.
No, but he's doing the Rabbanan. He's doing what we don't.
Oh, if he's the Rabbanan Birkat Hamazon, yeah, because then her she's always the Rabbanan, right?
Or
Yeah.
or a kid.
Let's not get into Birkat Hamazon now. Let's stick to the page. All right, just mention that short for a second. Don't confuse me, please. I will tell you. Okay. He says over here as follows: the af isha shehitpalel arvit shel Shabbat. A woman who prayed arvit shel Shabbat. Yochal leotzi yedei chova ish shelo hitpalel. Okay, so we're saying it can work both ways. Kiddush.
Okay.
The man didn't pray arvit.
No, I understand.
His kiddush is doraita. Her kiddush now is the rabbanan. She can still go. So we see this works.
Because we said
Okay.
before, arvut.
Right.
Her arvut and his arvut
Right.
the same.
It says further, v'gam isha shelo hitpalela arvit b'leil Shabbat yochel balo sheitpalel kvar leotzi yedei chovas kiddush shebemitzvos kiddush she'anoshim chayavis yesh din arvut. There is arvut by kiddush.
By kiddush. No bad birkat hamazon.
Their mitzvah of the man and the woman by kiddush is equal.
Same thing.
Equal footing. Here's your equal rights. It's by kiddush or Shabbat. Okay, everything's equal there.
That's it. From now
Okay.
on, one Shabbat I'm going to kiddush, one Shabbat my wife going to.
V'amrinon behu apel pi sheyotza motzi medin arbut. So since she was yotza, her din obligation, the biblical obligation, the right obligation, but he wasn't. But since they're the same gather, out arbut, she could be yotza his, in the same way for him. So therefore, she doesn't have to say Shabbat Shalom. He doesn't have to say Shabbat Shalom. You make it, it works. You want to go on the same level, you could. Okay, that is that. Now we're going to go to the final section over here, and that is the section about a katan. Can a katan say kiddush? Can he be motzi? Now, based on what we all said, so without even reading anything here, what should be the halacha? We already spoke about it.
Katan over here.
What's the katan? Well, yeah, katan was obviously that's what katan is.
No.
So the question is, based on all the principles we learned up until now, should a katan be able to be mitzi us in kiddush? Why not? Saying no, why not?
So he's the Rabbanan.
But which the Rabbanan does he have?
And he's
He's
not
the
obligated.
Rabbanan is of chinuch.
Chinuch, only chinuch.
So
And
his
he's not
Rabbanan is
obligated.
chinuch.
He's not obligated.
He's not obligated, right?
That's the main thing, obligation.
That's correct.
They have an obligation. There's
Let's read the
Obligation
Yalkut Yosef
only
outside of the Tzurba. We're on page 222. I'm going to read it to you. He says as follows. Says as follows. If a man is absent from his home, a boy who is not yet the age of bar mitzvah, may not recite Kiddush for his mother and siblings. The boy is not obligated by Torah to recite Kiddush or to perform any other mitzvah. It is through a rabbinical injunction that he's required to perform mitzvot, so that he'll be accustomed, it's chinuch, to performing them when he is older. He therefore cannot recite Kiddush on behalf of adults who are obligated by Torah to recite it. No one can perform a Torah day mitzvah for someone else unless he himself is obligated by the Torah in that mitzvah. That's arvut. I'm mechuyev in it. You're mechuyev in it. We can do it for each other. We can help each other out. But if you're not mechuyev in it, you can't do it for someone else. Even if the boy has not yet prayed arvit, right? And the other family members have prayed arvit, and they even did the express intention of fulfilling kiddush, not just memela, saying Shemon Esrei and fulfilling kiddush. They made the Shemon Esrei and they took it on purpose to make kiddush in there, like chulu, right? So now what? He didn't make kiddush at all yet, right? So I don't know. It's definitely not the right.
Like maybe he's
But
the
there's
right.
the Rabbanon, right? He may not recite for kiddush for them to fulfill the rabbinic obligation over a cup of wine, because his rabbinic obligation is al chinuch, and it's not rabbinic, and that same sense that they have a rabbinic nature. It's not the same.
But he can
Right.
do it only if there's nobody else can do kiddush.
That's what he says. If his mother does
No.
not know how to recite the
If,
Kiddush.
if she doesn't know how to read,
Okay, so let's see what he says.
exactly.
If his mother does not know how to recite the Kiddush,
And no father,
and there's no
nobody
other
else,
adult available, then the boy should recite Kiddush one word at a time, while his mother repeats the word over from him. You give the mother the cup of the wine. The mother holds the cup of wine.
She's the one saying the bracha.
He says the word to her. She says it. She has a chiyuv.
Right.
She can be might say everyone else.
Oh,
But the katan cannot do it.
right.
Now, this, by the way, happens. These cases happen. Father goes away for Shabbat.
Right.
The boy's at home. The boy's not bar mitzvah yet. And the mother says to the boy, "You're the boy of the house. You make kiddush." Doesn't work. That boy's kiddush doesn't work for anyone. The mother has to make the kiddush. Any age until they're gadol. Until they're gadol. This is the halacha until they're gadol.
13 and 2 here.
Okay, 13 and 2 years.
13 has 2 years already.
Right. Yeah, so we're not. That's not necessarily true. So when it comes to when it comes to rabbinic mitzvahs, we don't check. First of all, once someone told me they send the boy to the pediatrician and they let the pediatrician tell us if he has to hear. We don't do that because that's a bigger problem. We have a chazaka. For rabbinic mitzvahs, 13 years old, we assume he has his 2 hairs. When it comes to the Araisa mitzvahs, like reading Parsha Zachar, right? So then we wouldn't put a 13-year-old up to read it. We'll put someone that we know Dafka was already a gadol gadol. Okay, that's the way we usually work in halakha. The rabbinic guy's 13. We assume he has 2 hairs. No need to check. He has nothing to do. You let it go. Okay. Parsha Zachar is the Araisa. It has to be gadol reading it. And which is the Araisa has to be a real gadol. You have to worry that's a real gadol. Shouldn't just go with someone who's 13.
Worry means what?
If the kid's short and he looks like he's 10 years old and he's running around and he's wearing a hat and he's a bar mitzvah bacher, you don't give him to do it. You hold back. You hold back. I don't know if that's so true. I don't know. I didn't want to say it on the recording, but I don't know. When I went to camp, all my roommates were all Ashkenazis. They had more hair on them than I did, so I don't know. So I don't know. I'm just saying. It's just it's genetics. It really depends on your genetics. Okay, so that deals with the cotton. Let's just look at the Sefer Chinuch, Machshava, and with this we will end the final lesson in this Tzurba Merabanan volume 16. Again, scheduling note: next week, Reza Hashem will take the test b'chabura. We'll go through the questions of this whole volume. We'll try to go through them and get the sodos of what we need to be able to understand and move forward. And the following week, we'll start volume 17. That's the plan. If it changes, I'll let you know. Let's take a look at Sefer HaChinuch. Sefer HaChinuch says, Mitzvahs, Kiddush, Shabbos, V'dvar. L'davar b'yom Shabbos, b'chisosoi, b'chem b'tziosoi, shayabahem, zecher gedulas hayom, uma'alasoi. You want to talk about the greatness of the day. And the and its positive distinction from the other days before it and after it. As it says, Acharis Yom HaShabbos L'Kadshoy, Keloimer Zechar Zecher Kedusha V'Gedula. Ufirish Amru Lanu Chachamim Shedvarim Ela Mitzuvim Anu Lo Amrim Alayayin Shkein Ba Pirish Zechar Alayayin. Right. So everything we saw up until now, you want to say good words about it. Now, the Sefer Chinuch wants to give us Misharshay mitzvahs. What's the sharish of the mitzvah? What's the root of this commandment? Why are we giving this commandment? Kedei shenit orer mitoch maaseh zeh l'schar gedulas hayom. You can just walk into Shabbos and nothing clicks that it's Shabbat. It's just, I'm continuing. Right? That's what happens to the rest of the world. Friday night, Saturday is just another day. Everything else just continues. L'maisa, that's what really it is. So how do you know it's Shabbos? You got to do something to wake yourself up. So what do? We do these acts. So the Sefer Chinuch is very big on your actions create who you are. Your actions create what you are, when you are, where you are. So therefore, when a person is feasting and he's happy That's when he wakes up more, right? He's in the zone. Right? When a person is doing things, that leads him to be aroused in his acts. So Kiddush is supposed to wake us up. Kiddush is supposed to wake us up and tell us, hey, today is Shabbat. It's not just Friday night, and it's not just Saturday. There's a very holy aspect to it. That's why we do it with actions. Perhaps that's also why we stand, right? Our minhag al is to stand on Friday night's Kiddush, right? Perhaps it's more of an action. You have to get up. Don't just slouch back and get up. You're taking in Shabbat, especially Friday night where you're tired after the whole week, right? And you want to just take it easy, maybe sit down, make Kiddush. No, stand up, make an extra action, make an extra effort. You got to realize that you're walking into the holy day, right? And that's what the Sefer Chinuch seems to be saying over here with the Maaseh Kiddush. Okay, so Tam B'Nishlam, Toidel El Bar Olam. We finished this volume of volume 16. We should be to finish all the other volumes as well as we continue in Hilchos Shabbat. Thank you very much.